So, so it started one day at work when Deb came in and she said, hey, are you going to be free in a couple weekends? I need to move to a new apartment. And I thought it was a little weird because we weren't friends, and we were kind of friendly at work, but I didn't really even know anything about her at all. I mean, I knew that she didn't have a family, and I knew that she owned a building in Brooklyn, and she rented out a floor to some students that lived upstairs, and I knew that she complained about her neighbors a lot. She found something really weird about almost all of her neighbors. But other than that, she was just kind of a sort of a average mystery. You know, she was just sort of like really, very average in every way, like just t-shirt and jeans and a big bag and just kind of, you know, Deb. And so she, I remember one story that she told about her neighbors, and I think this kind of epitomizes my feelings about her very well, but she was saying, you know, it's like, you know, every morning I go out of my apartment and I leave, and the two girls that live upstairs, they keep putting an air freshener in the hallway, and, you know, I keep taking it out and I throw it away, and then I go back and there's another one, and she was so angry about this air freshener, and I just remember not identifying at all with her emotions. I mean, does she hate air freshener? Like it's lemon scent? I just didn't get it, you know. But it was just like, it's like slightly odd, but not too weird. Just something I didn't really get. So she smelled a little bit like mothballs all the time. Like also just kind of odd, but, you know, not super weird. But just, you know, there's just something like an aura of like just sort of a boring mystery about her, you know. So I thought, okay, well, I'm a nice person. Like, you know, I've moved like a bunch of times when I was in Brooklyn. It's nice to have someone to help out. So I said, okay, sure, yeah, come in. So then she came in a couple days later with a sheet of paper and handed it to me, and it was flight information about my flight from Chicago back to New York City, and small detail, she's moving to Chicago. So I felt like I'd been kind of roped in a little bit. I mean, we're not really friends, and now I'm going to Chicago, but I hadn't been there before, so I thought, okay, that's interesting. And again, it's like there's just something, you know, I was like just curious enough about her that I thought, okay, you know, I'm interested. Like, okay, let's do this. So on the designated weekend, I went over to her house, and the plan was I would go over Friday afternoon. We would load everything into the vans. There's 2 vans. She and I were going to drive one moving van, and then these 2 neighbors of hers that she complained about all the time, we're going to drive the other van. So, and we were going to leave Friday night and drive all night and then get to Chicago really early Saturday morning. And she was kind of pitching it to me like, and then you have all of Saturday to hang out with your cool friends, you know, in Chicago. So I was like, okay, that's good. So I got there on Friday afternoon, and the vans were outside, and I met Deb on the front step. And she invited me into her home, and so we went up the cement stairs to her building, and she lived on the first floor. So she opened up the front door, and we went into the air freshener hallway, and it definitely smelled bad, like something kind of not terrible, but just something kind of familiar, but not good, like the kind of place I would want to put an air freshener. That's what it smelled like. And she just sort of breezed through, and we go by the stairs that go up to the second floor where the neighbors live, and she opened up the door to her first floor apartment, and I stepped in, and it was like getting punched in the face with this just intense smell of ammonia. It was so strong. It like incapacitated me for a second. And it was kind of dark, and I stepped in, and I looked over into her apartment, which was a totally standard 150 square foot kitchen, living room. There's an island and a couch. Everything about it was totally normal, except for the floor was just covered in these moving objects. And it was like an ocean of fur. And there were probably about 60 to 70 cats just covering the floor. And when they saw Deb, they knew they were about to eat. So this wave of cats goes like rushing towards the kitchen, like the island counter, and they displace a group of other cats that get pushed off to the side. And it's like just these cats. And I remember thinking how vertical their movement was. So it was like they were like up on the couch and then down off of the counter, and it was just all this like motion. And so we wade into the apartment and through all these cats, and she goes to feed them. And so she's introducing me to the cats like one by one, and she knows all of them. And so she's like, oh, here's Mr. Elegance, and this is Patrick Pinecone, and this is Edie, and she's feral, so don't touch her because she'll try to get you, And she was, oh, these are the kittens, and they're domesticated, it's fine. And she was telling me she showed me the backyard, which was this little fenced-in backyard, and it had these little kind of hutches in it, and she was telling me that there's some cats that are out there now, some mom cat that had kittens, and she was really sad because she wasn't going to be able to get them into the house before we moved. And I realized, I think the reason, I realized first, I think Deb doesn't have a family, but I think she didn't really have any friends. And that probably the reason that she asked me was because she sort of identified with me a little bit. And I remember at work, she would say this thing all the time. She'd say, I used to be a modern dancer in New York City, and now I'm a square. And one day, you're going to be a square, too. And she would draw this little square in the air with her fingers. And, this is how square you're going to be. And I think she felt like I was her, and that one day I would have all of this, And so she was sort of introducing it to me, like, isn't it? And she was so excited. It was really, it's like her family. And I was sort of brought into the fold. So anyway, it's Friday, it's getting late. And so I realized that the whole purpose of this plan is that we're leaving Friday night so that once it gets dark, we can load all the cats into the vans so that none of the neighbors can see. And then we drive all night, and we get to Chicago really early in the morning so that we can load the cats into the new apartment before anybody gets up, so that nobody knows that they're there, because it is illegal. So I start doing, my job is to basically, to any of the cats that are already in the cages, I'm putting them in the van, and I'm going out and loading them into these shelves that got built into the van. And in the meantime, there's a lot of feral cats that haven't gone into the cage yet because they're not going to fall for that tuna trap, and they're not getting in there. And so she had actually invited a couple of vet technicians that she had somehow befriended, probably from so many visits, and they had come over to help get some of the feral cats into the cages. So they're busy doing that. And this one guy, this one kind of handsome, very large male feral cat named Harry Potter was not having it, and he was not going to get in that cage. He was like, hell no, I'm not going to Chicago. So she's trying to get him in the cage, and he's refusing and doesn't want to get in, and he finally just takes one for the cats, and he just lunges in, and he just bites a huge chunk of meat, right out of the back of her calf. And it's nasty. And he runs away. He's like, yes, And so anyway, the vet technicians are able to basically kind of patch it up, and it's not too bloody, but it's pretty nasty. And cat saliva has a lot of bad bacteria in it, and she needed some antibiotics before she started to get really sick. So she sends out one of the two neighbors who, by the way, they're already mad at each other for some reason. But the two other drivers of the van are mad at her. She's mad at them. I don't know why, but anyway, so she goes out, she's kind of disgruntled. Okay, fine, I'm gonna go get the medication. So we load all the cats, it's dark, we load all the cats in the van, and as soon as she gets back with the medication, we're off. So I'm driving the one van, Deb's got her leg up on the dashboard, it's swelling up a little bit, she's a little bit sweaty. And we go out through the Holland Tunnel, we get onto I-80, and we're just headed out to Chicago. And we're about maybe half an hour out, and the cats in my van kind of quieted down a little bit. They were yelling a little bit, but they're sort of quieter now. And so I hear her over on the passenger side. She's kind of relaxing a little bit, and she reaches into her bag and pulls out the little crunchy bag that the medicine came in, and she reaches in, and then I hear her oh no. And she pulls out an inhaler, and it turns out that the woman had picked up her asthma medication, not the antibiotics that she needs to try to get this infection to stop coursing through her body. So Deb realizes right away, oh, she is so angry at that neighbor. Two, she's about to get really sick. And I realize, oh great, I'm driving 11 hours all the way to Chicago. We're obviously not switching. So we just drive through the night. She just continues to get sicker and sicker and sicker. She's sweating. By the time we get there, she's pretty delirious. And so So we pull into Chicago, and it's this beautiful, sunny, it's just like the sun's just coming up, it's kind of dewy, it's very peaceful, very beautiful. We pull into the backyard of the building, so it's her apartment building, this little fenced-in backyard and this little kind of an alley. So the vans pull up in the alley, and the sun's just coming up, and she's able to barely sort of hobble out and up the stairs, and she's got an armful of kitty litter and some food, and she's carrying like an inflatable mattress, and there's no furniture in the place. She's barely able to make up the stairs. So we go about loading cat carriers into this new apartment. So we start lining them up in the living room, and we're putting them down one at a time, bringing them up the stairs, putting them down there, and then that fills up. So we start filling up the dining room. We fill that up, and then we move on, start putting them in the kitchen, and we're getting them all set up. And once we get the last cat in, the two neighbors are like, "I'm out of here." They're sick of it. They've had it up to here. The cats in their van didn't stop yelling the whole time, and they're just exhausted and they're angry. So they leave, and it's just me and Deb and these 60 to 70 cats that are just really stressed out. So she starts blowing up this air mattress because she's totally exhausted and she's kind of out of it. And so she plugs it in and it starts going. And she's kind of letting some cats out of the cages. And so I try to help her. I'm like opening up some cat doors, and they're just kind of weakly coming out, and they're all just piss covered and, stressed out, and they're all like kind of sniffing each other and sniffing the walls, and they're like, they don't know what just happened. And they start kind of slowly, they're like swarming out of the cages and starting to cover the floors and looking around the apartment. It's getting all furry. And I go back into the living room, and she's in there, Deb's in there, lying on this blue inflatable mattress. And I said to her, we should probably take you to like the emergency room or something, maybe we could like bring you, like we could just go and they could just check it out and they could like sew up your leg. And she was like, "No, I just want to be with my cats." And I was like, "Okay, but maybe, like, what if we just call your doctor and we could have him call the antibiotics into Chicago? I mean, you could just call it into the new pharmacy and I could go pick it up and then you could have it." And she was like, "No, please leave me alone with my cats." And I did. So I just said, okay, I tried. I'd been driving for 11 hours. I was so tired, and she really didn't want my help. And so I just said, okay. So I turned around and I walked towards the front door, and I got to the door and I'm opening it up, and I turn around and I look back and I just see, her lying on the blue mattress, and this, that swarm of cats is just starting to crawl, and they're going like up on the mattress, and they're up on her, and then they're crawling down, and they're kind of like up on the windowsills, and they're all over the place. And I just thought, it's just like she's, is she going to get eaten alive? And I just thought, this could be the last time anybody ever sees her. The end.